I will never forget the day my own niece used my card behind my back, drained it on a luxury vacation, and still had the nerve to write "made it" on social media, as if she had won at life, at my expense. I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story until the end and tell me in the comments which city you're reading from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Helena. I'm 62 years old. I've been a widow for almost a decade, and I've always considered myself a simple, honest woman, the kind who keeps receipts in envelopes and knows every cent that comes in and goes out. I worked my whole life as a seamstress, taking work from home, spending nights bent over the sewing machine to keep up with rent, medicine, bills, and, in the last few years, to try and have at least a little peace in old age. I never had children. Life just didn't go that way. Maybe that's why I poured such a huge part of my love into my niece, my younger sister's daughter, Laura, the little girl I carried in my arms, watched when her mother couldn't, who slept at my house on weekends, the one I lovingly called my borrowed daughter. If someone had told me years ago that it would be Laura, the very same Laura who would literally put me out on the street from my own house, I would have laughed. I thought I knew my family. I thought love and care were enough to keep someone on the right side of life, but that day, with my phone shaking in my hand, I began to realize I didn't know anyone as well as I thought I did. It all started almost trivially. I went to the supermarket in the morning, bought what I needed, came home, and put my card back in the same place as always, in a little pouch inside my bedroom wardrobe. I was careful, but never suspicious, and since Laura came over a lot, I left the door unlocked, the gate just pushed to, the house always open. At the end of that afternoon, I sat in my armchair in the living room, my legs aching a bit, and picked up my phone to pass the time. That's when the first story appeared. Laura, wearing huge sunglasses, lipstick on, a glass of sparkling wine in her hand, in an infinity pool I'd only ever seen in soap operas. Behind her, a huge hotel, everything shining. She flipped the camera to her own face and said, laughing, "Made it, baby." And over the image, those little white letters, "Made it." I froze on that frame, my heart beating a little faster. In the caption, the tags for the places: expensive resort, expensive restaurant, ultra expensive beach, I only knew from ads. I swiped to the side. She posted a plate of seafood, imported wine, the caption: "We deserve it, right? You only live once." Another story: shopping in a luxury mall, branded bags swinging on her arm, laughter, loud, music. Then a reel, a montage of the trip, her walking into the hotel room, jumping on the bed, showing the view from the balcony, everything edited with upbeat music. At the end, that same phrase, "Made it." At first, I didn't connect the dots. I just felt uneasy. You know when something itches deep in your soul, but you don't want to look too closely. That was it. But a few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't a story. It was a text message from the bank. Purchase approved, amount X, amount Y, amount Z. I started reading, one purchase after another, at places that matched perfectly what I'd just seen in her videos. The name of the establishment was the same as the sign by the pool, the same as the restaurant logo, the same as the shoe store. My stomach turned to ice. I opened the banking app. I tried to take a deep breath, but the red numbers on the screen almost knocked the air out of me. The limit maxed out. The account empty, a hole I could never cover in months of work, maybe not even in years. And there, in the corner of the screen, my full name, my card, my savings, my supposed security for old age. In that instant, I understood. I hadn't just lost money. I had lost the ground under my feet. The first reaction anyone would have is to grab the phone, call, scream, demand an explanation. I even scrolled to Laura's contact, my finger trembling over her name, but something in me locked up. I looked again at the stories, her laughing, dancing, toasting, and I read the phrase again. Made it, as if my life, my work, my years of effort were just the ladder she could climb to take pictures from the top. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and, for the first time in a long time, instead of reacting, on impulse, I chose silence. I didn't call, I didn't text, I didn't comment on anything. I just canceled the card. I called the bank with a steady voice, explained that the card had been used without my authorization, even though, deep down, I knew the person who'd done it wasn't a stranger. It was someone from inside. Then I grabbed an old notebook, sat at the kitchen table, and started doing the math. I wrote down every charge that showed up on the statement, added it all up, subtracted what I still had, what I owed, what would come in from my few sewing jobs. The conclusion was harsh. I couldn't just absorb that hit. If I pretended nothing had happened, I'd end up in the red, in debt, possibly losing the house. That's when the idea came, simple and cruel in equal measure. I looked around. My tidy living room, my old shelf, the worn but comfortable sofa, the crooked pictures on the walls. The house was all I had. And at the same time, it was the only thing that could pull me out of that hole. That night, I barely slept. But when morning came, I had already made my decision. If my niece had treated my house like an invisible ATM, I was going to turn that same house into something that at least helped me get back on my feet. I started with the listings. I took pictures of the living room, the bedrooms, the front of the house. I wrote, spacious, well-located house, ideal for a family, with backyard and a small back unit. The main house, and the bedroom that had practically been Laura's on vacations, would now become a source of income. I, Helena, the silly aunt everyone thought would always cover for everything, decided that day I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore. A month later, when Laura's car stopped in front of the gate, packed with cheap suitcases and unbranded bags, she got out with the same confident face as always, but this time there were no expensive sunglasses, no glass in her hand, just dark circles under her eyes. Frustration. She climbed the porch steps as if the house belonged to her by right. She turned the doorknob without even knocking. But when the door opened, it wasn't my silence waiting for her inside. It was the sound of children running in the living room, toys scattered on the floor, a TV, playing cartoons, a comforting smell of home-cooked food coming from the kitchen, and a couple sitting on the couch, looking like they'd just moved in. Laura froze in the doorway, confused. Sorry, I think I walked into the wrong house, she tried, embarrassed. The woman on the couch smiled kindly. You must be Miss Helena's niece, right? She mentioned you were coming today. Your room is out back. We're just finishing unpacking the boxes. Out back. Only then did Laura notice the boxes stacked in the hallway, the moving labels, the photos of another family on the shelf. The main house was no longer Aunt Helena's house. It was that family's house now. She walked down the corridor, almost tripping over everything, her heart racing, and went straight to the bedroom that, for years, she had treated as hers. But instead of the little sign with her name she once hung there as a joke, there was now a sheet of paper taped to the door. The handwriting was mine. Firm. I used what was left of the house to pay what you spent. This room is rented. Good luck with your maid at life. Helena. I was in the back unit, listening to her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I knew that, at that exact moment, my niece was feeling, for the first time, a bit of the humiliation she thought she'd never face. That day, looking through the little window of my cramped room, I was sure I was in control of the situation. I believed I'd gotten the perfect payback Wyatt, without shouting or scenes. I just had no idea how far Laura would go after that. Now I'm going to tell you how the humiliation of that day became the fuel for something much darker than a simple credit card scam. Before that scene of her arriving at my house and finding another family in the living room, there was an entire lifetime in which I did everything I could so Laura would never have to go through the hardships I went through. I became a widow early. My husband, Antonio, had a massive heart attack when I was 43. One day he left for work like always, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead and said, I'll swing by the market later and bring those oranges you like. He never came back. At that time, I only worked informally, hemming pants and altering dresses for the neighbors. The house wasn't mine yet, it was financed. His salary covered most of the bills. When he died, it wasn't just the bed that felt empty. It was the fridge, the pantry, the future. I could have given up right then, sold everything and moved into some tiny back room, depending on someone else. But something stubborn in me decided I was going to honor what we'd started. I took on more work. Party dresses, wedding gowns, school uniforms, curtains. The sewing machine hummed through the night, and many times I only realized the sun had risen when birdsong started to compete with the needle's noise. Every installment of that house, every brick, every patch of plaster was paid for with my body's exhaustion. I skipped more expensive medicine, postponed buying shoes, avoided seeing a doctor when I should, just so I wouldn't fall behind on payments. When Laura was born, it felt like life had handed me back a little piece of joy. I remember the first time I held her in the hospital, so tiny, her little mouth trembling, eyes squeezed shut. My sister, exhausted, looked at me and said, You're going to be her second mother, okay? I took that seriously. The first times Laura slept at my house, she fit completely in one little corner of the couch, wrapped in a pink blanket. I'd wake in the night just to check if she was breathing right. In the morning, I'd make heart-shaped pancakes and sprinkle chocolate on top just to see her smile. As she grew, my house became her refuge. She'd play in the yard until late, put on pretend plays in the living room, dig through my boxes of thread and make a collection of colorful spools. When she became a teenager, I noticed that along with age came a certain hunger for everything I'd never had. Brand-name clothes, the latest phone, trips with friends her mother couldn't keep up, her father even less. And guess whose place she came to? Auntie, do you think you can fix these jeans for me? I saw an influencer wearing them, ripped like this. Auntie, could you help me with my prep course this month? I promise I'll pay you back when I'm working. When I'm working. I heard that line so many times it became background noise in my life. I always said yes. I gave up a lot to see Laura study. I paid for materials, helped with transportation, bought a secondhand computer so she could do her schoolwork. When she decided to drop out of vocational school halfway because it wasn't her vibe, I swallowed my disappointment and pretended to support her. You're young, you've got time to figure yourself out. The truth is, I'd been surviving on my own for so long that I didn't know how to say no to someone I loved. I was afraid of seeming harsh, bitter, of losing the little family I had left. Meanwhile, the house changed too after I finally paid off the loan. It took me years to fix it. Up bit by bit, I changed the living room floor, painted the walls, put a glass door in the kitchen. I managed to save enough to build the little back unit, the one I would later end up in, thinking it could be a small guest space or, who knows, a rental for extra income in old age. Every renovation had a story. I remembered exactly how many party dresses I had to sew to pay the bricklayer. I remembered the back pain, the lost sleep. Laura, on the other hand, only saw the result, a comfortable, tidy, Instagrammable house, as she liked to say. The first signs of ingratitude didn't come as shouts, they came disguised as jokes. Once, she showed up with a friend at my house without warning. They came in laughing, filming everything on their phones. Guys, look at my aunt's house. It looks like those old soap opera houses. So aesthetic, she said, opening my kitchen cabinets, showing my cups, my crochet tablecloths. At the time, I laughed, a little embarrassed, but when I watched the video she posted, I heard her friend say, "Wow, your aunt is kind of a hoarder, isn't she?" "Yeah, poor thing. She keeps everything, but at least the house is hers, right?" "I'm still struggling," Laura replied, laughing. It didn't sound like just a joke. It felt like a stab, as if, deep down, she thought everything I had was too little, and at the same time believed she had the right to use what was mine too. Show off. Then came the borrowed money incident. One day I went to the supermarket and, at the checkout, realized a bill was missing from my wallet. Nothing huge, but I knew exactly how much I'd set aside. When I mentioned it to Laura, she laughed. "Oh, Auntie, sorry. I grabbed some cash from your wallet in a rush to order food with the girls. I'll pay you back later." "But why didn't you ask me?" I felt my face heat up. "Oh, you were sleeping, and I knew you wouldn't mind. Aunt Helena has a soft heart," she said, hugging me and running her fingers through my hair like I was a child. I complained, but let it go. The payback never came. Another time, a ring of mine disappeared. Simple, but sentimental, because Antonio had given it to me. I turned the house upside down. Months later, I saw a picture of Laura in front of the mirror, wearing the ring. "That ring is gorgeous. Where's it from?" Someone commented. "Vintage find," she replied, with a winking emoji. My heart clenched, but my mouth stayed shut. I told myself at least she was using something that reminded me of my husband. That's how I justified everything. I also noticed that, slowly, I stopped being aunt and became just resource. When she needed money, a place to stay, someone to pick up a package while she was at a gig, she remembered me. When things were good, lots of friends, boyfriends, short trips, she disappeared. In the last years before the luxury trip, Laura got obsessed with this perfect life online. Everything was content. If she came over, she'd take pictures of my cooking but captioned them like she'd made it herself. If she landed a bigger gig, it looked like she'd built an empire on her own. I remembered all the nights she crashed on my couch complaining about overdue bills, the times I paid off her credit card just so she wouldn't ruin her credit, and even so, when I read her captions, it was as if I'd never existed. "I conquered everything on my own," she once wrote under a photo with a new phone, leaning against my freshly painted wall. I swallowed that sentence like a half glass of water. It scraped all the way down. Even so, I kept opening the door, brewing fresh coffee when I knew she was coming, keeping her bedroom ready. My argument was always the same. She's young, she grow up, it's just a phase. I didn't know. I didn't want to see that this phase was actually who she was. A dangerous mix of no limits and a bottomless hunger to show off, to gain without counting the cost. When the day finally came that my card disappeared from my pouch and came back into my life in the form of bank alerts and travel videos, all those years took on a different meaning. I didn't know that all that effort, all those sleepless nights, every cent saved, every brick laid, would be used against me, as if I were just a step on somebody else's staircase. Now I'm going to show you the first clear sign that something was very wrong and that I chose to ignore it. After I watched Laura's entire trip happen in real time, paid for with my sweat and my card, I made that silent decision. I wouldn't call, wouldn't text, wouldn't beg for respect. I would act. But that doesn't mean she stayed quiet. In the days that followed, while I handled paperwork with the bank, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, not with apologies, with videos, photos, laughter. One afternoon, an audio came from her on WhatsApp. "Auntie," her voice came loud, wind in the background. "You have no idea where I am. I'll tell you everything later, okay? I'm living the life I'm owed. Love you." That hurt more than if she'd cursed me. I'm living the life I'm owed. As if life owed her. something, and not me, who had spent years sewing until my fingertips bled. I listened, took a deep breath, and left the audio unanswered. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone pinged again. It was a new reel someone had shared in the family group. It was Laura. She appeared in a very fancy nightclub, colored lights, expensive bottles being carried by waiters. In the video, she was in a tight dress, hair perfect, practically yelling into the camera. Some people were born to pay bills, and some were born to live. Mated baby. The caption below said, while some people complain about life, others make life happen. #grateful. My face burned. It was humiliating enough realizing I'd been turned into one of those generic, some people, the nameless masses paying bills so she could live. But the real shame, the first real public humiliation, was still coming. A few days later, a message popped up in the Santos family official group. It was my younger sister, Laura's mother. Guys, does anyone know if Helena is okay? Why? A cousin asked, because Laura said she's been sending some weird messages about cards, charges. I hadn't sent any messages. I was quiet, dealing with the bank. Then Laura herself joined the conversation. Guys, let it go. Seriously. Aunt Helena is fine, but she's a little stressed, mixing things up. Explained, I used the card with her permission, but she doesn't remember. I read that with my heart in my throat. Permission. I had never even known the card had left my pouch. What do you mean, Laura? I typed, my hands shaking. I never authorized anything, she replied quickly, as if she'd been expecting it. Auntie, you said if I needed it, I could use the card and we'd settle it later. Remember? That time you said this house is yours too. I understood I could count on you. I remembered the phrase. I really had said it. Years earlier, at a Sunday lunch. This house is yours too. For me, it was just an expression of affection. For her, apparently, it had become a contract. I never gave you my PIN, Laura, I wrote. I never handed you the card. She took a few minutes. Maybe she was crafting her next line. When she answered, I realized this wouldn't be just a misunderstanding. Guys, seriously, she wrote, but it was clear she was talking to the audience, not me. I don't want to fight with my aunt, especially in a group. I'm just worried. She's been forgetting things, getting confused. I've always helped her. I would never do anything to hurt her. That sentence landed like a bomb. Suddenly, the problem wasn't the money, the card, the trip. The problem was me, my head, my memory. A distant cousin replied with a sad emoji. Oh, guys, it's age, right? Everyone starts forgetting things someday. Another wrote, the important thing is, you work it out. Money, we can solve. No one, absolutely no one asked how I was supposed to solve this money. My sister, trying to calm things down, sent a voice message. Hell, don't take it the wrong way. Okay, Laura is young. She exaggerates sometimes, but you know she loves you. You've said things without thinking when you were upset too. Let's go for coffee when she comes back. Talk calmly. I listened to that audio lying in bed, feeling a mix of anger and shame. You've said things without thinking. They were throwing me in the same basket as her, as if I were impulsive, irresponsible. The humiliation wasn't just in the lie. It was in the subtext. The old aunt is confused. The niece is the balanced one. That same night, Laura posted a long caption on Instagram, publicly, of course, a picture of her sitting on a wooden deck by the sea, staring into the distance with a serious face. The caption was huge. There are people who only see what you spend, not what you feel. There are people who forget everything you've done, but charge you as if you've never done anything for them. I've always been the one who hustled, who helped at home, who gave up so much for others. And now that I'm finally living a little, there are people trying to make me feel guilty, but I won't because I know my worth. Those who understand, stay. Those who don't, will miss me someday. My name wasn't there, but anyone who knew the story, anyone in the family group, knew exactly who she meant. In the comments, the knives came out. You're a light girl. Don't let anyone dim you. Aunts, uncles, parents always think we owe them everything. Live your life. Who hasn't used the card borrowed, right? LOL. Each comment sounded like a chorus singing in unison that I was the villain in the story she was telling me, who'd never posted more than a birthday cake picture or a crooked filter Christmas photo, was now being reduced to a caricature. The bitter, controlling aunt trying to hold her back. That night, for the first time in a long time, I sobbed, but not for the money. I cried because I realized that in her mind, I was not the woman who opened her home, paid for her courses, lent her a bed when she had nowhere to sleep. I was just an obstacle, a name easy to turn into victim content. The first great humiliation wasn't seeing my money gone. It was seeing my life, my story, turned into content so she could play the victim and the warrior at the same time. Even so, I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and stuck to my plan. I posted the house listing, welcomed the interested family, showed every room calmly. I signed the contract. That day, when Laura arrived, thinking she'd find an empty living room waiting for her, but found another family on the couch instead, I felt like for a second, the world had taken my side. But as I watched from the back unit window, I saw the moment her expression changed, from surprise to hatred, from wounded pride to something I couldn't name then, a cold, calculated gleam. As if she were recording everything on that sidewalk to turn it into ammunition later. She looked at the paper on the door again, reread my firm handwriting, and clenched her fists. She didn't scream at me then. She didn't insult me in front of everybody. She just picked up her phone. And right there, seeing her raise her arm and turn the camera on herself, with tears ready to fall at the perfect moment, I realized that humiliation I thought I'd given her wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of her game. But that humiliation was still nothing compared to what they'd do later. Now I'm going to tell you how Laura turned my attempt at payback into fuel to turn my own family against me. I was at the little back window, curtain half open, when Laura finally lifted her face from my note on the door. The paper shook in her hand. The look she cast down the hallway wasn't the look of someone who understood a boundary. It was the look of someone whose ego had just been slapped. She took 2 steps back, walked to the sidewalk and, for a few seconds, stayed silent. I actually thought, maybe she'd just go. Maybe, for the first time, she feel the weight of what she did. But people like Laura don't accept defeat. They turn everything into a stage. She inhaled deeply, wiped her face, and, all at once, started screaming. Is this serious, Aunt Helena? Her voice echoed down the street, loud and theatrical. After everything I've done for you, you throw me out of my house. The nosy neighbor leaned on his gate. The woman across the street opened her window. A guy passing on a motorcycle slowed down. I was still at the back window, heart pounding. You didn't even come talk to me, Laura, I answered, trying to keep my voice firm as I stepped halfway out of the back unit. You took my card, spent my money, left me in debt. She turned her body, positioning herself just so everyone could see her face red eyes. Glossy, she was almost an actress finding her light. I used the card thinking I had permission. She shouted, you always said this, house was mine too, that I could count on you for anything. And now you humiliate me like this, with a note on the door, in front of everyone. The woman across the street muttered, wow, that's harsh. A neighbor who barely spoke to me added, hell, if it were me, I'd deal with that in the family, not like this. I felt the ground give way beneath my feet. The scene I'd imagined as my moment to set a boundary was becoming a performance about the cruel old aunt on the street. Seeing she had an audience, Laura raised the volume. Can you believe she rented out the house, kicked her own niece out, and is now leaving me with nowhere to sleep? I come back from a trip, tired, broke, and this is how I find out, broke. I thought about the card charges, the resorts, the sparkling wine, but nobody was thinking about that. The only image there was the crying niece on the sidewalk. She grabbed her phone. Since you wanted to solve it like this, Auntie, let's solve it like this then. And she started recording. Look at this, people. My own aunt, kicking me out of the house. She showed the note, the hallway, the boxers of the new family, then flipped the camera back to her own face, tears now falling just right. After everything I've done for this family, I'm being treated like trash. She knew exactly what to say. A mix of rage and shame burned in my chest. For a moment, I thought of going down to the gate and ripping the phone out of her hand. But I knew any rough move would be more fuel for her narrative. I went back into my little room, closed the door, leaned my back against it, and listened to the rest of the show from a distance. Her crying, telling half-truths, focusing on my attitude, never on what she'd done. That same day, my WhatsApp turned into a pressure cooker. Messages came from everywhere. Helena, what happened? I saw Laura's video. Did you really kick her out? She's devastated. Poor thing. Can't you talk to her? An old friend from church sent a voice message. Sweetheart, I know you're hurt, but remember we take nothing from this life. Don't hold on to resentment. She's young. She makes mistakes but learns. Don't let the devil use this to divide your family. I stopped the audio halfway. We take nothing from this life. I'd already carried needle, pricks, debts, back pain. Now, apparently, I had to carry slander too for the sake of peace. Laura herself, later, sent me a direct message. Auntie, you crossed every line, but I won't expose you anymore. I just want my things that are still there and somewhere to sleep until I get back on my feet. Then, I'll disappear from your life if that's what you want. I read that sentence 10 times. She talked as if I were the villain who had destroyed her life. Every word was loaded with guilt thrown back at me. In the days that followed, the pressure only grew. My sister came over, crying, saying I was overreacting. Hell, she's your only niece. She's your blood. You made mistakes when you were young, too. I never stole from anyone, I answered, blunt. She didn't steal. Hell, she used it thinking she could. Her head works differently. No, she's always been impulsive. Impulsive. That was the magic word everyone used to sugarcoat what she did. In the family group, the passive-aggressive quotes started. Family that throws you out isn't family. There are people who prefer money over blood ties. I felt cornered, alone. The only person who'd said anything in my defense was a distant cousin who wrote, "You shouldn't have used your aunt's card, Laura, that's a crime." Within 5 minutes, he'd left the group. One day, I came back from the pharmacy with a little bag of medicine in my hand, tired, blood pressure a bit high, and found a folded piece of paper under my door. It was from Laura. "I have nowhere to go. If you don't help me, I'll have to sleep on the street. If anything happens to me, it will be your responsibility." That wasn't just a plea. It was emotional blackmail. If she did anything crazy, the blame would again fall on me. I sat on the bed, put my hand on my chest and felt my heart beating out of rhythm. My meds were running low. The overdue charges from the cards still hung over me, and now the city had an image of a niece abandoned by me. On Sunday, I went to church hoping for some peace. Right at the door, a lady hugged me, too tightly, full of pity. "Helena, my dear, we're praying for you and for Laura. God will bring reconciliation. Don't let this hurt make you sick, okay?" I gave her a weak smile. Sick I already was, but the illness eating me alive wasn't just high blood pressure. It was the feeling of injustice stuck in my throat. That same night, I gave in. I called my sister and sent a short voice message to Laura. "You can stay here, in the back unit, but it's temporary. The main house is rented. I depend on that money now. And if you're staying, you have to help with chores, and mostly, with my medication. I'm not well." She answered in seconds, her voice soft. "Of course, Auntie. I just need a chance. I'll take care of you, I promise." When she arrived with her bags, there were no screams, no scenes, just the air of an offended saint. She walked into the back unit looking around with disdain. The worn floor, the tiny bathroom, the bed against the wall. "So this is where you're living now," she commented, giving a little laugh. "From the big house to a room at the back. What a shame." I swallowed hard. "It's what there is for now," I replied. "The big house is paying off the debt you made." She raised her hands, theatrical. "I already apologized to Auntie, but you don't remember, right?" "Apologized when?" I asked, confused. "That time on the phone, before I left on the trip." She rolled her eyes. "You're mixing things up, but it's okay. I don't want to argue." That was the beginning of the real gaslighting. A pretty word for a very ugly thing, making you doubt your own mind. She repeated that kind of phrase several times a day. "Auntie, I told you that yesterday already. You don't remember? I already put your medicine on the table. You must have forgotten where you put it." "I didn't say that. You're making it up." I'd always had a good memory, but I started catching myself doubting. Did I really say that? Did I hear wrong? When I forgot something simpler message, a pot on the stove, she made sure to comment loudly, as if talking to the air. Poor Auntie, she's really getting old, and I saw the look people gave me. The neighbor, the guy from the supermarket, even the pharmacist. "Miss Helena, you need to take care, okay?" he said once, when I went to buy medicine. "Laura told me you've been mixing up doses. That's dangerous." I clenched the little bag in my hand. "She told you that?" "She did, but it's good. She's helping, right?" It's so rare to find young people who care about the elderly these days. Elderly, the word hit me like a brick. At the public clinic, I got the same treatment. I went to renew my prescription and the doctor, a young man, looked at me over his glasses. "Your niece came by the other day, worried. She said you've been confused about medication times, that she's found you disoriented a few times." "Me? Disoriented?" I asked, stunned. "Miss Helena, age comes to all of us. There's no shame in admitting you're forgetting things. We can investigate early dementia if needed, okay?" Dementia. The word echoed in my head like a cracked bell. On the way out, Laura slipped her arm around my shoulder, affectionate. "That's why I say, you need me. Imagine if you were alone." At night, lying in bed, I tried to line up my memories like patchwork squares in a quilt. I remembered old things perfectly, dates, names, smells. How could I suddenly be as confused as everyone said? At the same time, I really had been feeling worse. Dizziness, palpitations, a tiredness with no bottom. I took my medicine correctly. At least I thought I did, and still, I seemed to be getting sicker. When I mentioned this to anyone, the answer came ready. "It's emotional. Helena, what happened with Laura shook you, messed with your head and heart." For the first time, I started to doubt myself. Was I really losing my grip? Had I misunderstood Picard, the permission, the trip? Had I been too harsh? But deep down, way down, a stubborn thread of clarity and dignity wouldn't let me fully swallow the story they were building about me. Something didn't add up. It wasn't just emotional. My body gave off strange signs on specific days, in specific ways, and every time I tried to follow that thread, one of her phrases cut in. "Auntie, forget it. Go rest. I'll handle everything." And it was exactly at this desperate point, when I was almost convinced the problem was only in my head, that a tiny detail changed everything. Now, I'm going to tell you what happened on a seemingly ordinary day that opened the first crack of light in all that darkness. The detail that changed everything happened on one of those days when you wake up, already exhausted. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, heart racing, head heavy. Laura came knocking on the back unit door early, far too cheerful for my taste. "Auntie, I brought your meds, and that tea you like," she said, walking in without asking, balancing a cup on a little tray. The smell of the tea made me nauseous. It was a sweet, overly floral scent that turned my stomach. It wasn't the same smell as the chamomile tea I used to make for myself. "What tea is this?" I asked, suspicious. "Just a mix I made with leaves from your garden. You always said plants are medicine, right?" she answered, laughing. "Relax, trust me." She placed 2 pills beside the cup on my bedside table. "Take this one now and this one in 8 hours, okay? I've already organized everything." I held the cup, but my hand trembled. That dizziness that followed her perfect combinations had already become routine. I brought the cup to my lips, and I don't know if it was clumsiness or God giving me a shove. The cup slipped, it fell to the floor and shattered, tea spilling across the tiles. "Damn it," she snapped, more annoyed than concerned. That tea was enough for 2 days. She crouched down to clean, muttering under her breath. I sat on the bed, still holding the pills. "Leave it, Laura, I'll clean it," I said, trying to get up. "No, I'll do it, but you have to take your meds, okay? Don't forget them." She picked up the shards and left, slamming the door. In the middle of all that, I ended up slipping the pills into the pocket of my apron without even realizing it. That day, for the first time in weeks, I didn't drink the tea or take her combination of medicine. The rest of the day was different. I was still tired, of course, but I didn't get that strong dizziness after lunch. I didn't have the late afternoon blackout or the frantic palpitations at bedtime. I lay down and, for the first time in a long time, my body just felt old, not sick beyond reason. That night, before changing clothes, I found the pills in my pocket. I picked them up, stared at them. They were the same color as always, but something about it didn't feel like coincidence. If these medicines are supposed to make me better, why did I feel better the day I didn't take them? That question pounded in my head while I washed dishes, while I hung a towel on the line, while I heard Laura laughing inside, talking to someone on the phone. Later, when I went out to bring the laundry in, I saw Laura by the flower bed. She had a little pruning shears in her hand and was carefully cutting the purple petals of a plant I almost never touched. It was a pretty flower with a dark center, one a neighbor had given me years before. He'd joked, "People call this one sleep flower. They say it's so strong even the smell makes you drowsy." Back then, I'd laughed and planted it just because I liked the name. That memory came back, whole, like someone had hit replay in my head. "What are you doing with those flowers, Laura?" I asked, getting closer. She jumped, hid the petals behind her back for a second, then covered. "Just taking some to decorate my room. You don't mind, right?" She flashed a quick smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes. I nodded, but something lit up inside me. Sleep flower, different tea, medicines she selected, specific bad days. That night I looked into the bathroom mirror and whispered to myself, "Helena, either you really are going crazy, or something very wrong is happening right under your nose." Instead of shoving that voice aside, I decided to listen to it. The next morning, when Laura came in with my morning medicine, I did something different. "Just leave it on the table, sweetheart. I'll take it in a minute. I just need to finish folding these clothes." She did. As soon as she turned her back, I grabbed the pills, examined them, and tucked them into a little tin box where I used to keep buttons. Instead of taking them, I put my own medicine, the ones I knew I'd taken straight from the blister pack from the doctor, on the table. I took only mine. No tea from her, no combos from her. That day again, the episodes got weaker. A bit of dizziness, but nothing like those near-fainting spells. So I started my own quiet investigation, the only way I knew how, with pen, paper, and observation. I got an old notebook and drew a crooked table. Day, medicine Laura gave, medicine I took myself, tea, how I felt. I started pretending to drink what she brought. I'd touch the cup to my lips, smile, thank her. Then, as soon as she left the room, I'd pour the tea down the sink and stash her pills in another small box. On the days I followed Laura's prescriptions, the symptoms came back strong. Racing, heart, blurred vision, feeling like I might collapse. On the days I did things my way, the symptoms eased. I wrote everything down, times, how I felt, who was home at the time. After a week, reading that notebook, a pattern started to appear. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't just emotional. Someone was tampering with my routine, and that someone was the same person who held my morning cup of tea. Still, part of me refused to believe it. She was my niece, the little girl I'd seen crawl across that yard, the little girl who'd slept hugging the teddy bear I sewed for her. She would never do that. "You're overreacting. It must just be a medicine that doesn't sit well." That voice also lived in my head, but every time I tried to listen to it, the image of Laura cutting the sleep flower petals came back, along with the cold look she had when she thought I wasn't watching, and her comments about my confusion. That's when I decided to go a step further. I knew nothing about technology, but I knew any phone these days could record video. I had an old phone in a drawer, cracked screen, but it still turned on. I charged it overnight, hidden. In the morning, I got up earlier than Laura, before her morning care. I put the phone, propped up in the kitchen cabinet, half hidden behind a flour tin, camera pointed at the counter where I usually left my medicines. With trembling fingers, I hit record. Then I went back to bed and pretended to sleep. A while later, I heard her footsteps, the kitchen door, drawers opening and closing. I recognized the flick of blister packs, the clink of a cup, the scrape of a chair. She walked into the back unit smiling like always, with the cup and pills. I played my part. I thanked her, took them in front of her, but hid the real pills under my tongue and spat them into a tissue as soon as she turned away. Later, when she went out to run errands, I fetched the phone from behind the flour tin. My hands were sweaty. I sat at the kitchen table and hit play. The video was shaky, but clear enough. Laura walked in, looked around, rummaged through my pillbox, took some pills out, put others in. At one point, she opened a little jar where I had never kept any medicine and pulled out a different tablet, mixing it with mine. Then she grabbed a handful of petals from the purple flower I'd seen through the window. She tossed them into a mug, poured hot water over them, stirred, sniffed, made a face, and added a tea bag probably to mask the taste. My stomach turned. I fast-forwarded, my heart beating a rhythm the doctor would hate. She never looked at any prescription, never read any label. It was all done with a cold calm, almost methodical, like someone piecing together a puzzle, with me as the main piece. In that instant, the last shred of doubt that she might just be trying to help disappeared. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I didn't shove the phone in her face. I took a deep breath and thought about everything I'd already lost. I couldn't lose, on top of it, all the little credibility I still had. If I was going to accuse her of something so serious, I needed more than a shaky video and a notebook everyone already thought was proof of my paranoia. I needed certainty. And more than that, I needed someone outside that sick circle of family and neighbors who believed anything Laura posted. That night, lying in my narrow bed, I made another quiet decision. This would no longer be a game between just the two of us. I would look for someone who could examine what I had and tell me, with authority, whether I was losing my mind or whether someone really was trying to destroy me. I needed to be sure, and that's when I went looking for help. Now I'm going to tell you who stepped into the story and turned the game in my favor. I've always been the kind who hates to bother others. I grew up hearing that problems should be handled at home, in silence, without exposing anyone. That's why deciding to ask for help from someone outside was one of the hardest choices of my life. The morning after I recorded that video, I woke with my head heavy but with a new certainty. If I kept relying on family's good intentions, I'd end up buried before my time. And maybe, with everyone saying it was sad but inevitable, I put on my best simple dress, a light coat of lipstick, tidied my hair as best I could, and grabbed my purse. Inside it, I carried 3 things. My notebook full of notes about the bad days, some of the pills I'd separated those Laura had prepared for me, the old phone with the shaky kitchen video. At the back unit door, Laura asked, wearing a fake smile. "Where are you going, Auntie? Want me to drive you? To the clinic? Follow-up appointment the doctor scheduled." "Oh, good. Tell him you've been forgetting things again so he can raise your dosage." She laughed, as if making a joke. I just replied with a and walked out. But instead of getting off at the stop near the public health clinic, I stayed on the bus for one more block. I went to a small private clinic a neighbor had mentioned months earlier when I complained about the public system lines. At reception, a young woman wrote my name down and asked, "What brings you in today?" "Pain, follow-up, exams. I'm here because..." My voice cracked for a second because I need someone to look at me without already having an opinion about me. She gave me a puzzled look, but wrote, "General consultation." The doctor who saw me was Dr. Paulo, late 50s, graying beard, tired but kind eyes. He'd listened as I told him I had high blood pressure, had been feeling very sick, and that the public clinic already wanted to investigate dementia. "And do you feel like you're forgetting a lot of things?" he asked. "Doctor, I forget a pot on the stove now and then, like everyone, but I remember the day my husband died. I remember my 3rd grade teacher's name. I remember my account number by heart. What I can't forget is what's being done to me." I took my notebook out of my bag and placed it on the desk, then the little bag of pills. Finally, with shaking hands, the phone. I wrote everything down. "Doctor," the days I took what my niece gave me, the days I didn't, and here, I pointed at the phone. "Here is a recording from my kitchen. I don't know if this is all in my head, but I need someone who studied for this to tell me if I'm crazy, or if someone is actually trying to make me sick on purpose." He stayed silent for a bit, flipping through the notebook. With each page he turned, my heart beat louder. Then he picked up the pills, examined them, separated some. After that, he watched the video. I watched his face as he did. I saw his jaw tense when Laura tampered with the medicines. I saw him replay parts, bringing the phone closer. When he finished, he took a deep breath, removed his glasses and looked at me with a seriousness I wasn't used to seeing. He finally spoke. Mrs. Helena, I'm not a police officer, but as a doctor, I can tell you one thing with a lot of certainty. There's something very wrong here. I knew it, I whispered, feeling tears rise. I felt it. But everyone kept saying it was all in my head. He rested his elbows on the desk and laced his fingers. These pills here, he pointed at some of them, have nothing to do with your treatment. Some of them, in fact, should never be taken together with the medication you already use. And this tea, this flower you mentioned, sleep flower. I don't know it by that name, but I can have it analyzed. He went quiet for a moment, choosing his words. What your notebook shows is a pattern. On the days when someone else handles your medicine and gives you this tea, you get worse. On the days when you handle it yourself, you improve. That doesn't match simple aging or early dementia. I gripped the edge of the chair so I wouldn't collapse, so I'm not crazy. You might have some anxiety, some fear, he answered, with a sad half smile. But crazy, no. What I see here is a very lucid woman trying to survive a very alarming situation. He wrote out some test orders and referrals. I'm going to request specific blood tests to check for signs of chronic poisoning. I'll also write a report describing what you brought me, your notebook, this video, the changes to your medication. Keep this report safe. And what do I do with it? Go to the police. You can absolutely file a report, he said. But I know that's hard, especially when it's family. He took another deep breath. Either way, Mrs. Helena, besides taking care of your health, you need to protect yourself. Legally, you live alone and depend on the rental income from your house. Right. I live with my niece in the back unit, but the main house is rented. Then you should talk to a lawyer you trust, someone who can advise you on a will, who legally has rights to your house, and what protective measures you can take. I walked out of that appointment with 2 pieces of paper that were worth more than any opinion from my family, a lab order and a signed, stamped report saying that my symptoms weren't normal. They were suspicious. On the sidewalk, I took a deep breath and, for the first time in a long time, felt I wasn't alone. A stranger had looked at me and seen what nobody in my own house wanted to see. I wasn't the crazy old woman. I was a victim trying to scream. I followed the doctor's advice. The next day, I went to the office of a lawyer he'd recommended, Dr. Legita. She greeted me with a firm handshake, the kind that makes you feel safe. She was in her 40s, sharp eyes, none of that pitying look I'd gotten used to. I told her the whole story, from the card to the pills. I showed her the video, the medical report, the notebook. She listened without interrupting, just taking notes. When I finished, she crossed her legs and spoke with a calm that cut like a knife. Mrs. Helena, legally, you're at risk, not only because of what she's already done with your card, which is a crime, but mainly because of what's happening now. But, she's my niece, exactly. Do you know what would be very easy to do? Soon enough, she leaned forward a bit. For someone to say you're no longer able to care for yourself, ask the courts to declare you incapacitated, and appoint themselves as the one responsible for all your assets. I went cold. Laura, in charge of my house. If nobody does anything, that's a very likely scenario, she said, without sugarcoating it, especially if she's already telling people you're confused and forgetful. Those words hit like a slap. I remembered the pharmacist, the doctor at the clinic, neighbors, repeating the same script. What can I do? First, she said, counting on her fingers, you need to organize your documents, the deed to the house, proof of payment, rental contracts, everything in your name. Second, you need to think about who truly deserves to be in your will. Do you have one already? I shook my head. Never did. I always thought that I'd just leave everything to Laura. Exactly. She sighed. You can change that. You can register a will leaving the house, to a charity, to a relative who really helps you, to someone from church, or even set it so the house is sold and the money used in a specific way. The important thing is, don't leave it wide open for anyone, especially someone who's already shown what they're capable of, to take over once you're vulnerable. She paused and went on. And at the same time, you should keep gathering and storing your evidence somewhere. Safe, the cloud, a flash drive, with someone you trust. If you ever need to involve the police, you'll already have a trail. I left with a strange knot in my chest, fear and relief walking side by side. In the days that followed, I did exactly what she said. I took the house deed, which I'd always kept like a trophy, and went to the notary's office with Dr. Lee. I signed papers and registered a simple but clear will. The house would not automatically go to Laura anymore. I left part of it to a shelter for women and part to a cousin, who had always helped me quietly, without making a show of it. I also asked her to draft a document explicitly revoking any old permission or power of attorney I might ever have given Laura by accident. I had never given her one, but I wanted it on record anyway, as prevention. I came back home feeling strangely light, not rich, not avenged, light, as if, for the first time, I'd put a lock on my own life. From the outside, nothing had changed. Laura still walked around the house like she owned it, making cute little teas, posting caretaker routine photos with captions like, "Taking care of the one who once took care of you isn't a duty, it's love. #grateful. Inside though, something had flipped. When I looked at her, I didn't see just my niece anymore. I saw someone who was, at the same time, dangerous and an opportunity to show who I really was. It was around this time that my sister suggested a reconciliation family lunch. "Let's bring everyone together, Hal," she insisted over the phone. "Laura wants to make peace. You do too. We gather the family, pray, eat, talk. That's what family is." At that point, an idea started taking shape in my head. If there was going to be a family lunch, then that would be the perfect stage. Not a stage for me to humiliate anyone, but to finally show the truth. Not just about the card and the money. About what had been happening inside my own home while the world applauded the perfect niece from social media. So I started preparing my own game. I asked Dr. Paulo for extra copies of his report and the lab results, which already showed consistent signs of poisoning. I asked Dr. Lygia for a written summary of her advice, with dates and her stamp. I saved the video in more than one place, and most importantly, I started acting with a calm that made Laura even more confident. I thanked her for the tea, smiled when she talked about her sacrifices, and let her believe she had bent me. She had no idea that while she was cutting petals in the yard, I was quietly cutting away the power she had over me. I already knew everything, and none of them had a clue. Now I'm going to tell you how I prepared the day when the truth would come out. Right in front of everyone who had once believed her version more than my pain. The lunch was my sister's idea, but the one who turned it into a stage was me. "Let's do it at my place, Hell," she said on the phone. "Laura is ready to make peace. You are too. We bring everyone, pray, eat, talk. Family is like that." I almost laughed. Laura ready to make peace was the same Laura who, the night before, had posted, "Learning to forgive even those who tried to destroy me. God sees everything." But I agreed. "Fine, pick a day, I'll bring dessert." When I hung up, my hand was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was adrenaline. A lifetime spent defending myself, and for the first time, I was preparing a counterattack. I spent the next week organizing everything in silence. The family thought it would be just a reconciliation lunch, with tears, hugs, and an Instagram picture at the end. Laura thought it would be the perfect moment to cement her image as the redeemed niece. I knew it would be the day I stopped begging for credibility and started demanding respect. The day before, I went to see Dr. Lygia. She handed me a clear plastic folder. "Here are copies of your will, the document canceling any old authorizations, and the summary you asked me to prepare, explaining your situation," she said. "It's not a lawsuit, but it's enough to show you're not legally unprotected." "I don't want to humiliate anyone, doctor," I said, pressing the folder to my chest. "I just want them to stop calling me crazy." "Truth with proof speaks for itself," she replied, serious. "And if things get too heated, call me. I can come over." On the morning of the lunch, I woke up early. It was hot, the sky an exaggerated, almost mocking blue. I put on a floral dress I hadn't worn in years, applied a brighter lipstick, and tied my hair in a bun. I wanted them, when they looked at me, not to see the confused old aunt. I wanted them to see a whole woman. The family renting the main house had gone away for the weekend, as arranged. I'd made a deal with them in advance, paying a day's rent so I could use the house that Sunday. When I walked into the living room that wasn't quite mine anymore, my heart tightened. The walls, now covered with the other family's photos, seemed to be watching me. Still, I started setting things up. I laid out the white tablecloth I'd embroidered with Antonio years ago. Plates lined up, cutlery, polished, heavy glasses, cloth napkins. I made a colorful salad, rice, farofa, roast chicken. My sister brought lasagna. Another nephew arrived with soda. Someone showed up with garlic bread. The table looked full, beautiful, smelling like the Sundays we used to have. While I straightened a plate here and a glass there, I rehearsed every detail of what I was going to say. I couldn't get lost. I couldn't lose the thread. The folder with the documents stayed on the sideboard in a neutral cover beside a tray of sweets. The flash drive with the kitchen video was in the inside pocket of my cardigan. Dr. Paulo's report was folded in my purse. I could feel the weight of every piece of evidence like lead, but lead that was finally going to become ammunition on the right side. Laura, on the other hand, dressed as if she were going to a christening or graduation. She walked into the living room in a light dress, soft makeup, wearing that gentle expression I rarely saw in real life, only in her stories. Look at this, guys, she said, filming the table, bringing the phone close to the food. Family together, good food, good vibes, God is good, all the time. Someone shouted from the hall. Tag us, Laura. She laughed, turned the camera to her own face, and winked. Today is a healing day. Okay. I almost choked on the word, healing. That's what she called taking care of me with poisoned tea. Slowly, everyone arrived. My sister, out of breath, hugged me in the kitchen. Thank you. Hell, you don't know how long I've waited for this day. I couldn't stand you two throwing little digs at each other anymore. I smiled without answering. A cousin whispered in my ear, "It's so good you're making up. Laura's been so down. She's really suffering with all this, you know." I looked at him and simply said, "Today you'll understand better." Kids ran through the house. The smell of food mixed with cheap perfume, cleaning product, life. One nephew turned the TV on low, leaving some random game playing on mute. The ceiling fan spun lazily, pushing warm air from one side to the other. From the outside, it was just a normal Sunday. Inside me, every detail was part of a ritual. The chair placement, who sat next to whom, the exact moment I would raise my glass. I had already decided I wouldn't pull Laura aside for a private talk. I wouldn't call just my sister to one corner. I'd tried that before, and the result was always the same. Conversations that died right there, twisted afterward and reappearing on social media in her words, as if truth were liquid and moldable. This time, I needed light, witnesses, silence that listened. When everyone was seated, my sister said a small prayer, thanking for the food and asking for peace and restored bonds. Those pretty phrases that sound good when you don't know what the other person's been plotting in the shadows. I closed my eyes and put my hands together, but instead of asking for anything, I just thought, God, if I'm being unfair, shut me up. But if I'm right, hold me up. Lunch was cheerful at first. Laughter, inside jokes, old memories. For a few moments, I almost forgot why we were there. Laura, in her repentant niece role, poured juice for me, put more food on my plate, and made sure to speak loudly. Auntie, have a bit more. You've been so weak, I worry about you. From the outside, it was a perfect scene. The attentive young caregiver and the fragile aunt, being supported. I could feel the admiring looks at her, soft comments, "She's changed, hasn't she? You see, so many kids out there lost, but she's here, taking care of her aunt." I chewed slowly, swallowing not just food but years of a twisted narrative. Sometimes anger rose like heat at the back of my neck. Other times fear tightened my chest. What if I freeze? What if my voice fails? What if they laugh in my face? But whenever those thoughts came, I remembered Dr. Paulo's face telling me I wasn't crazy. I remembered Dr. Legia's strictness. I remembered the nights I woke up short of breath, thinking it was the end. After dessert flan, chocolate cake, fruit salad, the energy softened. People slouched in their chairs. Kids dozed in laps. Sunlight fell across the floor in bright rectangles. Then my sister said what I knew was coming. "Guys," she tapped her spoon on her glass to get everyone's attention. "Before people start leaving, I want to propose something." The room quieted. "Life is short. We never know about tomorrow, right?" she went on. "I'd really like to see Helena and Laura finally making peace. You two are the strongest women in our family. This war doesn't make sense." Some nodded. Others just watched. She looked at me, then at Laura. "How about you both say a few words, each one from your side, get it off your chest, and we end the day with a toast to peace." Laura took a deep breath, dabbed at an invisible tear in the corner of her eye, like she was holding back emotion, and looked to the audience before looking at me. It was instinctive. Everything about her went through the public first. "I'll do it," she said, voice soft and emotional. "I messed up in a lot of ways, but what hurt me most was feeling like my own aunt saw me as an enemy." She started talking, and I let her. I didn't interrupt. I knew that was part of the script that needed to run its course. She talked about her childhood, about the heart-shaped pancakes I made, about how I helped with her prep courses. She talked about how sometimes Auntie's words were harsh, but she knew it was out of love. She talked about financial stumbles, about being impulsive, and of course, she talked about the card. "I used the card the wrong way, in a moment of illusion," she said, voice cracking at just the right point. "But I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to live a little." And when I came back and found the house rented out, that note, it hurt. It hurt because it felt like I was worth less than things. Heads nodded with pity. I saw my sister's eyes fill with tears. A cousin twisted his napkin. Emotionally, "I may have messed up, but..." She looked at me, meeting my eyes. "I never wanted you to get sick, Auntie. I never wanted to see you like this week. I always took care of you. If you've been forgetting things, getting confused, I'm just trying to help." She ended with a deep sigh, leaving the sentence hanging, like she was saying, the problem is her, for not accepting help. There was a silence, thick, heavy, expectant. I looked around. Familiar faces. People who'd shared tables, holidays, grief, birthdays with me. Some had judged me behind my back. others to my face, but all of them were staring at the same table now. My heart pounded. I reached for the glass in front of me. Your turn, Hell, my sister said gently. Say it in your own way. I didn't stand all at once. First, I drew in a slow breath, like someone preparing to dive into icy water. Then I pushed my chair back, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward me. I picked up my glass and stood. My legs shook, but when I spoke, my voice surprised me. It wasn't thin or trembling. It was steady, full of a calm I didn't know I had. Since you all want a toast, I said, raising my glass, I'll toast, but not just to peace. I'm toasting to the truth. Some people shifted uneasily. Laura watched me with a mix of curiosity and annoyance, as if she was still sure I'd end up playing the same old scene of the aunt who cries and forgives. She had no idea what was coming. The moment for the toast had come. Time for the speech. Time for the announcement none of them expected from that confused old woman. Now I'm going to tell you what I said in front of everyone, and how, in a matter of minutes, the perfect victim image Laura had built began to crack. I stood there with my glass in hand, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze. The room was stuffy, smelling of food, perfume, and anticipation. I heard everything Laura said, I began calmly. And I want to start by saying this. She's right about one thing. I made mistakes. I saw a spark of triumph in her eyes. Heads started nodding, relieved. There, the old ladies, going to apologize. They must have thought I was wrong to believe that love without boundaries could raise anyone, I went on. I was wrong to think opening my house, my wallet, and my life was enough to build character. It's not. The silence got heavier. I spent years making the mistake of overlooking things, calling a pattern a phase long, after it had become a choice. But the day I watched my niece flaunting her maid life with my card, without even looking me in the eye to ask, I stopped making that mistake. People swallowed hard. My sister frowned. Laura tried to cut in. Auntie, we've already talked. You've talked plenty. I cut her off, still without raising my voice. Now you're going to listen. I set my glass down and walked to the sideboard. I picked up the folder and the flash drive. My heart hammered, but my hands were steady. Do you really think I rented out my house on a whim? That I moved into the back unit? Because I cared more about money than blood? I looked from face to face. I did it too. Pay off a crater. The crater Laura made in my name. My sister tried to soften it. Hell, she already admitted she was impulsive, but impulsive is buying an extra pair of shoes, not maxing out a widow's card at a luxury resort. A few people gave awkward laughs. Laura rolled her eyes. I was going to pay it back, she snapped, smacking the table lightly. You're the one who refused to talk to me. With what, Laura, likes from Instagram? I asked, because I haven't seen a single cent. I sighed. Let the anger settle for a moment before I continued. But what hurt me most wasn't the money. It was watching you call me crazy in the family group, saying I gave you permission to use my card and then forgot. It was watching people repeat that I was confused, that it was just age. I looked at my cousin, at the neighbor invited along, at others who'd parroted the same line. Eyes dropped all around the table, and then the worst started. I began getting sick, dizzy spells, palpitations, faintness, the clinic doctor talking about dementia, and my niece here, handling my pills and tea, telling the world that without her I couldn't even manage my own medication. A collective sigh rippled through the room. Laura was shaking her head dramatically, playing the wronged saint. Auntie, for God's sake. Now you're going to say that I raised my hand. I'm not going to say anything alone. The facts are going to speak. I walked over to the TV. I'd already arranged everything with my youngest nephew, the tech-savvy one. He had set it up earlier. I handed him the flash drive. Put that video on, please. The one in the kitchen. What video? Laura asked, her voice thinning. The screen lit up. It wasn't a perfect image, but you could clearly see the kitchen counter, the blister packs, the mug. There was Laura, walking in alone, looking around, rummaging through my blister packs, taking one pill here, putting another there, pulling something out of a bottle that wasn't my prescription, mixing it in, then the tea purple sleep flower petals going into the mug, her sniffing, making a face, adding a regular tea bag. No one breathed. The only sound was the ceiling fan and, faintly, Laura's own humming in the video while she assembled her little experiment. Laura stood up. That was a misunderstanding. She shouted. I was just trying to organize her meds. This video is out of context. What context, Laura? I asked, looking straight at her. The context where, on the days you were organizing my pills, I nearly ended up in the hospital, and on the days I got my own medicine, I felt better. I took Dr. Paulo's report from the folder and held it up. Here, lab results showing poisoning. A doctor's report saying it's not just age, that something strange was going on. I spread the paper on the table for anyone to see. My sister reached for it, her hand shaking. Laura, is this serious, Mom? Not you too, she said, voice fraying. You're going to believe a shaky video and a paranoid old lady's notebook. Paranoid. I gave a bitter half smile. Then let's move on to the next paranoia. I pulled out another document, the summary signed by Dr. Ligia. This is from my lawyer. She explained something very interesting to me, that when a family starts saying an elderly person is confused and needs help for everything, it's very easy for someone to go to court, get power over that person. And then, just like that, the confused person loses both their mind and their house. I turned back to the others. Do you know who'd already been telling everyone I was losing my sanity, that I couldn't remember anything, that I couldn't do anything without her? No one answered. They knew. I didn't wait for her to get that far. I looked back at Laura. I went to the notary, changed my will, and closed every door I could for anyone to lay their hands on my house, claiming it's for my own good. Laura's eyes widened. What? You heard me, I said. The house you thought would fall into your lap when I died, now has a different destination. Part goes to a shelter, part to people who have truly helped me. You are left with what you've already taken. Her face flushed, then paled. You're doing this to punish me. No, I said calmly. I'm doing it to protect myself. Punishing you would be letting you stay here and keep handling my medication. A murmur rippled through the room. My sister, still holding the doctor's report, looked from the paper to her daughter's face like she was seeing a stranger. Laura, tell me this isn't true. Mom, for God's sake, she almost screamed. You're going to trust a blurry video and some papers over me. I slapped my palm on the table a bit harder this time. The glasses rattled. Of course they're going to trust it, I said, letting my voice rise for the first time, because it's not just the video, or just the notebook, or just the tests. It's everything. It's a pattern. It's my life almost going down the drain, while you all applauded the caregiver niece. Captions on Instagram. I looked at each of them. How many of you have repeated that? I'm getting confused. How many of you looked at me funny when I talked about the card? How many said, oh, poor Laura, young people are like that? No one dared answer. Then I turned back to my niece. Laura, I'm not your enemy. I never was. I was the aunt who gave you a bed, food, schooling, a house to call home. You put yourself on the other side when you decided my life was just a resource. She was breathing fast, chest heaving. Her eyes shone, but not with real tears, with rage, pure rage. So, what do you want now? She spat. For me to get on my knees and beg forgiveness, for everyone here to call me a monster. No, I said. What I want is simple. I want everyone to know exactly who they're dealing with. I want them to stop calling me crazy when I say I smell something burning. I don't want anyone ever again putting my medicine in your hands. I took a breath. And I want you to know that from today on, not 1 cent leaves my pocket for you. Not for made it life and not for hard life. No card, no loans, no room, no mattress to soften the fall. Her mouth fell open. You're going to throw me out on the street. I'm getting you off my jugular, I corrected. If you want a place to sleep, it'll have to be somewhere you don't have access to my things. If you stay anywhere near me, it'll be under the watch of people who understand what you're capable of. Doctors, police, lawyers. The mood in the room shifted. No more pity for the poor girl. Now it was fear, shock, and a silent question in the air. How far has this already gone? You can't do this to me, she whispered, clenching her fists. You can't turn everyone against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, Laura, I replied, picking up my glass again. You did that by yourself. I just turned on the lights. I raised my glass one last time. So, since this was supposed to be a toast, I'll drink to this being the last time I have to explain myself to any of you. Whoever wants to keep believing Instagram captions, good luck. From now on, I'm believing in exams, in reports, in documents, and above all, in myself. I took a small sip, set the glass down, and pushed my chair back. No one said a word as I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. The only thing I heard behind me was Laura's voice, now high and hysterical, mixing sobs and fury. This isn't over. You'll see what it's like when someone has nothing left to lose. When I stepped outside into the bright sun, I knew nothing would ever be the same. I thought I'd finally turned the game around. I just didn't imagine that, wounded in front of everyone, Laura would try to write the cruelest chapter of all, using her own life as a weapon against me. Now I'm going to tell you what happened to each of us after that day, and how my niece almost managed to twist the truth into yet another accusation against me. The days after that lunch were strange, like the house itself was breathing differently. The air felt lighter and, at the same time, heavy with something I couldn't name. Laura disappeared for 2 days. No knocking on the back unit door. No good morning auntie, no tea. She stayed shut in her room, slipping in and out at times I never saw, like a wounded animal licking its wounds. The family group chat went silent. No one dared mention what had happened, but I knew that kitchen video and the medical report were already making their way from phone to phone. Relatives who had flooded me with poor Laura messages before simply stopped talking to me. Others, who'd called me crazy before, reappeared with, "If you need anything, I'm here." I answered neither. What struck me was watching, quietly, as her world started to shrink. The friends from her trips vanished. The gigs she bragged about slowed down. I overheard her arguing over the phone. "You're really going to believe that video? Seriously?" I was the only one taking care of her. No one seemed willing to risk their own name on her side anymore. I, meanwhile, began rebuilding my footing in silence. I took back full control of my medication, cleaned out the yard, ripped out plants I no longer had the slightest reason to keep. I left the purple flower standing there, still, as a quiet reminder of what I had almost missed. The lawyer called me. "How are you?" "Breathing," I replied, for the first time in a long time, breathing without asking permission. She laughed softly. "Remember, any new threat, report it. You're no longer just a strict aunt, you're a victim. With evidence, that changes everything." I thought that after all this, Laura would gather what was left of her pride and leave, find another place to spill venom. But people who live for the spotlight don't know how to exit the stage. Her countermove came a few days later, on a hot, stuffy evening while I was folding sheets in the back unit. Suddenly, screams from the front of the house, high-pitched, hysterical, half sob, half theater. "I can't take this anymore." I wasn't born to be humiliated. I dropped the sheet and ran to the yard. The main house door was wide open, hallway light flickering, neighbors already at the gates, people crowding the sidewalk, that quick, sticky curiosity that appears in seconds. I stepped into the living room, and there it was, the scene. Laura on the floor, hand to her forehead, papers scattered beside her, notes. A neighbor knelt beside her, panicked. "My God, call an ambulance, somebody call an ambulance." I approached slowly and picked up one of the notes. It was Laura's handwriting, but exaggerated, dramatic. "I can't take my aunt's humiliation anymore. If I do something stupid, it's her fault. She took everything from me. A performance, a soap opera suicide attempt. But to anyone clueless, it looked like a real tragedy." My legs went weak, not from fright, but from the sheer cynicism. She was willing to put even her own life on the line to try and reclaim the narrative. Soon, sirens filled the street. An ambulance, a police car. People asked what had happened, and neighbors stepped in. The niece couldn't take it anymore. "That aunt is too harsh." My God. I took a deep breath. Once again, the script wanted to cast me as the villain. In the ambulance, a nurse asked Laura, who was now crying more softly with a distant look, "Did you do anything to harm yourself?" I tried," she whispered. "It's just that my aunt keeps persecuting me, accusing me of horrible things. I'm the only one who cares for her, and she wants to destroy me." The nurse shot me a hard look. I knew that look by heart. At the police station, while she was being evaluated, an officer called me to the side, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Helena, this is a delicate situation. She left notes blaming you. Do you confirm your relationship is conflictive?" I almost laughed. Conflictive was a polite word for it. The relationship is dangerous. For me, I took out what I'd learned to carry, like an ID. Dr. Paulo's report, Dr. Legia's summary, pictures of my notebook. "This is all from before tonight's little scene," I said, handing it over. I'd already been getting poisoned inside my own home. I've got tests, dates, a video. She's not just a sad girl. She's someone who was tampering with my medicine. He flipped through the papers more carefully than I expected. "A video here." I showed him on my phone. They watched. Another officer joined, arms crossed, brows furrowed. "Have you already filed a complaint about this?" he asked. "Not yet. I thought it could still be fixed within the family." He sighed, that sigh of a man who's seen this film many times. "Then, today, you're going to file it. For attempted poisoning, fraud, whatever fits. You can't treat this as just a quarrel between aunt and niece anymore." Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, a police psychologist talked to Laura. She cried, said she just wanted to die, that I'd taken everything from her, that I was making up illnesses to ruin her life. This time, though, her word wasn't the only piece on the board. The papers, tests, video, notebook, everything pointed against the perfect victim she was. Trying to play the outcome of that night was a mix of relief and grief. The police opened an investigation, and, most importantly, determined we could no longer live under the same roof. "While this case is pending, you two can't be alone together," the officer explained. "And given the documentation you brought, Mrs. Helena, we're also sending your niece for a formal psychiatric evaluation. Her behavior is concerning." That word hung in the air. Concerning. Watching Laura leave under escort, not in handcuffs, but not free either, hit me hard. I didn't feel pleasure. I didn't feel revenge. I felt mourning. Mourning for the girl I'd helped raise and who, maybe, had never been the person I insisted on seeing. She still tried, one last time, to stab me with her eyes. You did it, didn't you, Auntie? You destroyed my life, I answered, exhausted. I only stopped you from destroying mine. After that, my routine changed completely. The house, once a battleground for a quiet war, became a rebuilding site. I changed the locks, added chains, moved the hiding place for my documents. I reorganized my medication, again, this time with help from Dr. Paulo and a nurse from church, people who genuinely wanted me alive. For the first time, I agreed to see a therapist recommended by a woman from the congregation. I sat on a strange couch and talked about things I'd never brought to the surface. Antonio's death, the loneliness, the guilt of not having children, the neediness I'd poured into Laura. The therapist listened with calm patience and, at the end of the session, said, "You spent a long time believing that if you didn't do everything for her, no one would. But the person who ended up forgotten in all that was you." I started adding little things to my daily life that had nothing to do with anyone else. I sewed again, but now for pleasure, not panic. I made a brand new bedding set for myself, with a colorful quilt I'd always wanted and used to think was too much of a luxury. I went back to church not as Laura's aunt, but as Helena, who liked to sing off-key and light candles for her husband. With the rent from the main house and my meager pension, I could finally breathe. I paid off what was left of the credit card debt, set aside a small emergency fund. I also broke some invisible habits, stopped answering unknown calls after 10 at night, stopped treating every family event as my responsibility, stopped over-explaining myself. Sometimes I'd sit alone in the back unit and find the silence strange. Some days it felt heavy, like the echoes of what had happened were still stuck in the walls. Other days, the silence felt like a hug, the freedom of knowing no one was rummaging through my wardrobe or filming my house for yet another victim. Caption: News of Laura came in fragments. I heard she'd been placed in temporary psychiatric care for evaluation. Some relatives still visited her, crying, saying, "Poor girl, her mind isn't right." Others pretended she'd simply moved away. I didn't feel hatred, just a strange weight, a mix of thank God I got out and how did we let it get this far. It was during this phase that I began not just to rebuild the house, but my image of myself. Discovered I could enjoy my own company, that I could say no and the world wouldn't collapse, that I could be firm without being cruel. One day, helping my sister clear out an old wardrobe at our mother's place, I came across a box full of old documents, reports, yellowed letters. In the middle of the mess, one name caught my eye. Laura's, written in pen, on a big envelope. I didn't know it yet, but inside was part of the answer I'd been looking for. How long that coldness had been inside her, and why no one had done anything. But more important than what they lost was what I gained, the chance to look in the mirror, and finally see the woman I really was. No filters, no edits, no captions written by someone else. Now I'm going to tell you who I became after all this, and what I found in that envelope, about Laura, our family, and the responsibility we all share when we choose not to see. The cardboard box was on top of my mother's old wardrobe, dusty and smelling of things kept too long. My sister and I were there to sort documents, what to keep, what to toss, what needed to be passed on. "Take this to the light." "Hell, I can't see a thing anymore," she said, pushing the box toward me. I sat on the floor and started opening envelope after envelope. Certificates, old paid bills, my father's letters, recipes. In the middle of it all, a thicker envelope with Laura report, urgent, written on the front, in blue ink. My heart tightened. "Do you remember what this is?" I asked. My sister went pale. "Oh, that's old stuff, kid stuff. Leave it, leave it." Funny how that phrase had followed Laura her entire life. I opened it anyway. Inside was a psychologist's report from when she was about 10 or 11. The wording was technical, but the summary was clear. Repeated cruelty to animals, frequent lies without evident guilt, difficulty feeling remorse, habit of manipulating situations to blame others. As I read, scenes flashed in my mind that had seemed small at the time. The dead bird she brought home because it fell out of the nest, the neighbor's dog that came back limping after she'd played vet, the cousin's broken toy that somehow ended up on Aunt Helena's bed. The report ended with a sentence that froze my blood. "It is strongly recommended that she receive continuous psychological follow-up. Ignoring these signs may lead to increasingly serious behaviors in adolescence and adulthood." Clipped to the report was a handwritten letter from my sister, addressed to me. Never sent. "Hell, you know I can't handle everything. Laura is different. Sometimes I look at her and see a kind of emptiness that scares me. The psychologist said things I didn't want to hear. If anything ever happens to me, don't ignore the signs. She doesn't feel things the way other children do. Take care of her, and take care of yourself." The shaky, smudged letters at the end betrayed old tears. I closed my eyes for a moment, holding that letter like a mirror that had arrived late. The truth is, I ignored it. I myself did. I saw signs and called them strong personality. I saw manipulation and called it impulsive. I saw selfishness and called it youth. We romanticized what was already a loud warning. Why did you never show me this? I asked my sister. She shrugged, eyes wet. I was scared. Scared of labeling my own daughter, scared of seeing what was on that paper, and you were always so loving with her. I thought maybe love would fix it. Love and silence. A dangerous combination. A few months after the lunch, the police, and the psychiatric evaluation, news became official. Laura would stay in a psychiatric facility for a while under court-awarded supervision. It wasn't jail, and it wasn't exactly voluntary treatment either. It was something in between, protection and containment. I took a long time to decide whether to visit her. Part of me never wanted to see her face again. Another part still remembered the little girl eating heart-shaped pancakes at my table. In the end, I went, not for her, for me. The clinic was cold, very clean, with a strong disinfectant smell. Doors with silent locks, narrow windows, light-colored walls. A nurse led me to the visiting room. She's been calm, cooperative, she said, but it's hard to say what's really going on. Inside, Laura came in wearing simple clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked both younger and older at the same time. Hi, Auntie, she said, sitting in front of me, her voice soft and polite. For a few minutes we talked about trivial things, clinic food, routine, the meds she said she was taking. She spoke almost affectionately, as if everything that had happened was just an overreaction, some distant misunderstanding. I never wanted to kill you, you know, she said at one point, with a small smile. I just wanted you to need me. That way it would be easier for you to give me what I wanted. She said it the way someone comments on the weather. No weight, no guilt. A cold shiver ran down my spine. On my way out, the psychiatrist pulled me aside. Thin man, subtle glasses, hands clasped. Mrs. Helena, I know you're trying to understand where this started, he said. I read the old reports and the new ones. I've seen what's happened. I took a deep breath and asked the question that had been hammering in my mind for months. So has she always been bad? He took a few seconds to answer. Bad is a word that carries a lot, he replied. What I can tell you is this, she's always been different. The people who chose to pretend nothing was happening were the adults around her. It hurt to hear, but it was a clarifying kind of hurt. The blame wasn't only hers. She carried what she carried inside, but we, the grown-ups, had given her a stage, excuses, and a red carpet for it to grow. On my way out, I walked past a room where patients were drawing. One of the staff called me. Your niece drew this today. I think she wanted you to see it. It was a drawing of the house, our house, the back unit, the garden bed in front of my window, and, highlighted, the sleep flower, huge, almost bigger than the house itself. Next to it, she'd drawn tiny faceless figures scattered in other gardens. The message was clear. Controlling my life was no longer an option, but her mind was still looking for other games. I left the clinic with a weight in my chest and, at the same time, with a calm conclusion. I'd done everything I could for her. The rest no longer depended on me. Time passed. A year, then almost 2. My life today is very different from the one I had when I lived to clean up after Laura. I still wake up early, but not because someone will bang on my door asking for money or attention. I wake up because I like to watch the sun slowly fill the kitchen and warm the floor. I make my own coffee, my own tea, no mysterious flowers, set out my pills and check the labels twice, out of care, not fear. I walk in the small park nearby, talk with other older women, laugh about little things. Sometimes I sit on a bench alone and think about life, without feeling that gaping hole in my chest that once screamed, "You're wrong, you're crazy." I went back to sewing for others, but only as much as my body allows. Choose my work. If someone wants to pay me in promises, I say no without remorse. If someone shows up, saying, "You have a house, you don't need that much," I answer clearly. My roof isn't a prize, it's the result. The main house is still rented. That income gives me dignity. The back unit is truly my home. Now, not a punishment. I painted the walls a light color, bought a new armchair in 10 installments on my card, and hung pictures of me, not of Laura. I pulled the sleep flower up one quiet afternoon. As I dug around the roots, I found a small glass jar buried there, full of little souvenirs, bits of someone's broken toy, a cousin's missing earring, a neighbor's shirt button, an old dog collar, trophies of cruelties she'd collected over time. I buried the jar deeper and planted basil on top. At least now, whatever grows here will be for seasoning food, not poisoning people, I muttered. Today, I have friends at church who know me as Helena, not Laura's aunt. I volunteer with a group of women who've left abusive relationships. When they tell their stories, I recognize the same pattern. Love without boundaries, guilt piled on them. He's just impulsive. It's just a phase. Until one day the phase becomes a threat. I didn't become a saint. I carry scars in my body and my soul. I still wake sometimes startled by the smell of tea, even when there's nothing on the stove. I still feel a tightness in my chest when I see young people posting made it on top of someone else's sacrifice. But I'm no longer the woman who confuses love with letting herself be killed slowly. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: love without limits is not love. It's permission. Permission to destroy, to invade, to use someone else as a stage. And family without boundaries becomes a cage, not an embrace. Today I know that saying no is also an act of love. Love for myself. Love for the part of my story that still belongs to me. If anyone ever tells you you're cruel for setting boundaries with someone who hurts you, remember me, the widow who almost died drinking tea in her own house while the world applauded the caregiver niece. I'm no heroine. I just decided, a little late, but still in time, that my life is worth more than the guilt they tried to shove down my throat.